Welcome to I Said What I Said, a sports podcast giving you opinions not heard anywhere else. I'm your host, Brad Wakai, alongside my co-host, Tyson Gentry. And Tyson, we're wrapping up the NFL division previews. Last two divisions here, AFC East, NFC East, and then we get ready for the Chiefs taking on the Ravens in the opener, man. I mean, it's hot and heavy now. Like, football is here.
It's crazy. As we're recording, we're just a couple days away from kickoff, and then there is until Valentine's Day, the weekend after Valentine's Day, the football won't be on your TV. So we did it, ladies and gentlemen. We got all the way here, and we saved the most confusing division maybe for last.
Yeah, it's certainly two interesting divisions here. And so let's dive into the AFC East. And if you're just tuning in, what we do is just give you our overall thoughts on the division. We go through and break down each team and talk about how we think they're going to do this year. So when I look at the AFC East, Tyson, it's interesting that we've gone from the dominance that the New England Patriots had under Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. And despite the lack of overall and high-end success, this has been the division owned by the Buffalo Bills. And they have the best quarterback in the division. At least, they've had the best quarterback in the division with Josh Allen. I don't think that changes this year. But the change in roster across the entire division makes it seem like the AFCs could be a little bit more gettable than it's been in the past. What are you looking at in this one?
Well, I think that's there's so much projection going on in this division, especially, you talk about the Bills, but we're all kind of just assuming, or at least the narrative is that, well, Aaron Rodgers is going to be Aaron Rodgers, and the Jets are going to do non-Jet things all year, and they're going to be just fine, and they're going to win this thing. I have a little bit of hesitation thinking that, and same thing that we talked about with the Falcons. It's really hard for somebody at this age to come back from an injury like that. Game processing speed and arm talent-wise, Aaron Rodgers is going to be in a better place, probably losing his mobility than somebody like a Kirk Cousins, but for 100 years now, it's been the most underrated part of his game. And if he can't maneuver the pocket the way that we're used to seeing from him, it won't be Zach Wilson levels of anemic on this offense, but it might not be your, fire Garrett Wilson up and all your fantasy football drafts and Breece Hall to the moon, and this offense is going to be so fun. There's still a massive hole at wideout too, I think. You can have your Mike Will and all of that stuff, and I think that's awesome. For 4 weeks. We've seen this in LA a bunch of times. The guy doesn't stay on the field. We don't know necessarily what we're getting out of the tight end room. We're still banking on a Breece Hall healthy season, which you could say that about all of these teams, right? But we know the defense is going to be really good. Brian, I just think that there's a world in which Robert Saleh is looking for a job at the end of the season. And I don't know if it's fair or not, but if they don't win 10, 11 games, it's the New York Jets. They're going to do something.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely interesting. There's a world here, Tyson, too, as we jump in the Buffalo Bills. I mean, does Sean McDermott survive if they have a down season? I mean, it's been icy the past couple of years. I mean, just the collapse, the 13 seconds against the Chiefs is unacceptable. It's inexcusable not to have a good end-of-game situation.
A lifetime ago, too.
And especially when you're the defensive coordinator. I know Leslie Frazier was in charge there, but if you're a defensive guy, you got to have everything buttoned up. We know now, I'm not saying you go man coverage when you're blanketed on the guys doing press, but to sit in prevent zone against Patrick Mahomes where they can just take 15 yards a pop with timeouts was malpractice. It was just insane. And the fact they didn't kick it through the back of the end zone was absurd. So people are remembering that stuff when it comes to Sean McDermott, but at the end of the day, they still have Josh Allen. This is a team led by the second best quarterback in the NFL. The only question that comes to my mind on the offense is how do they look at wide receiver? Because you made the decision to move Stephon Diggs, whether it's locker room cancer, whether it just didn't get along, whether you saw him declining, because since he's come to the Buffalo Bills and had a really good season the first couple of years of his tenure, he's been on that slow and steady decline. And I think, inside the organization, they saw that, better than the Houston Texans or anybody else that might have been interested. So who's the pass catcher? Is it going to be Dalton Kincaid at tight end? Is it going to be, the rookie, Coleman? I don't know, because he got rid of Gabe Davis too. But I think the strength here is the running game looks legit. And so you hope that Josh Allen can just turn one of these wide receivers into stars like Patrick Mahomes has done during his career.
And we'll see kind of who that is when we went through kind of our prospect breakdowns like Keon Coleman struggles to separate. That's not a secret. That's going to be evident on his Florida State tape, on his Oregon tape, and it'll probably be evident on his NFL tape. Does that matter to somebody like Josh Allen has just shown us? I don't care. I'll fit it in the window. And maybe that's the dream landing spot for a guy like Keon Coleman as a quarterback who just says, whatever, I'm going to throw you the football. Or it's Khalil Shakir, but that's not necessarily going to be an alpha wide receiver that you can rely on year in and year out. That seems to me more like a 1 or 2 year thing, and then maybe can go back into the role as a plus slot receiver. I am very high on Dalton Kincaid. I think you are too. I still think that other tight ends are going to eat into that workload. I don't think that they're going to look at the way this thing has been broken down for the last couple of years and go, we need to get rid of some of these guys' touches in a Stephon Diggs and in a Gabe Davis absence. And that defense, they lost a handful of some really good players, especially in division too. I mean, we're talking like Jordan Poyer's playing for the Dolphins. That's a huge one. There's a lot of new faces on this defense, and it has felt like in years past that Sean McDermott's been able to elevate some B players into B plus status and some C minus players into C plus status. He's going to have to do it again for this team to win this division. I'm not as low on Buffalo as I think kind of the national narrative is right now. It kind of feels like they're just being brushed aside in favor of the Jets or the Dolphins. I'm not saying that the Bills are going to win this division, but man, they got 17, and anything is possible when you have that guy. Do you think that James Cook survives the season as a like bell cow style running back, or do you think that they're really going to look for a Ray Davis type to take over those goal line carries and get the things out of Josh Allen's hands?
Man, well, I think they're going to do a 2-back set. Like, I think they're going to try to use Cook as a workhorse, but just more so kind of like an Austin Eckler where he's running the ball primarily and being used as a weapon out of the backfield. But I don't think we're looking at a guy like Adrian Peterson by any means, where he's constantly being used. But I do think they're going to be like, dude, this is your show. This is your backfield. Let's go.
And that creates another set of problems because I think that James Cook looked pretty good last year in that role. I also think that James Cook has been a little fragile in his NFL career. He comes from a lineage of fragile running backs. We'll talk about Dalvin later today. But I think that they're thinner at some of these skill positions than we're used to talking about when it comes to the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, Curtis Samuel, another wide receiver they brought in. That could be somebody to keep an eye on, in terms of, I mean, let's be honest, horrendous quarterback play in Washington. So what does he do here with Josh Allen? And you mentioned it. I mean, just go through their transactions log on defense. So it's just a bunch of people in, bunch of people out. Like, they're just completely reshuffling. And then their star linebacker, I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, not Epinesa, but oh God, what's his name?
The only thing in my head right now is Matt Milano, and I know
Matt Milano. Yes, he's hurt, so he's out for the year. He tore his biceps.
That's a win.
Yeah, so that's a big loss for them because we've seen how important he is in their defense. And so not having him, I think that'll be something to keep an eye on. Let's get into Miami, Tyson. And, it's the same story every year, right? Like, when the weather's hot, when they're dealing, this offense is clicking, this offense is humming. They pay Tua Tagovailoa. Okay, we kind of knew that. His agent and Tua said, the market's the market. He's been a productive quarterback, whether you like him or not, think he's elite or not, doesn't really matter. Like, this is the quarterback market now, and he's locked in. So what did the Miami Dolphins do, Tyson? Instead of saying, okay, we kind of seen our flaws, like when it gets cold weather late in the year, we're going to double down on our speed, our athleticism, and our ability to run this offense. Go sign Odell Beckham Jr. You extend Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert. You sign a two-year deal with. I mean, you try to upgrade the offensive line again. It's a double down on what they want to do. Now, the biggest thing here is Vic Fangio decided to move on, so you bring in a new defensive coordinator. Is this something that the defense can pick up quickly? They're also banged up on the front of the line, so that's something to monitor. I mean, so where are you at with the Dolphins right now? Because I think there's the offense we know about, but it's the other ancillary pieces that continue to be a question mark.
Yeah, it's doubling down, but it's like playing blackjack and you need a face card, right? Because they might end up with the 12, and they're in big trouble here. I think like one of the things that I'm excited for in Miami, and I'll get to the defense thing here, but I kind of wanted to go on what you said. I don't think that they expected Devon Achane to walk into this room last year and do what he did as a rookie. So how do those touches get schemed up? What do you do with Jalen Wright, the new fresh face in from Tennessee? How does he kind of work into this thing? if Mostert still has the juice that he had a year ago, then that maybe renders that point moot. But we've seen this age cliff come for all running backs. Raheem Mostert has had just one of the most insane NFL careers that you can, like. Elijah Mitchell is maybe following a Raheem Mostert path, is the way that it looks right now. So I think that them on offense, I think they're going to try to run the football a little bit more and kind of just mix in 2 or 3 of those guys to get touches. And they've been looking for somebody to kind of take that role. We'll see if they view Jalen Wright kind of in the Raheem Mostert mold, or if he's another guy, they're just like, hey, we need to scheme him 7 touches and then just let him go. If that's the case, they're going to be in big trouble. I think that they need somebody to be able to fill that Mostert role. On the defensive side of the football, it's kind of a double-edged sword because you lose some really good players, right? I mean, the best player from this defense a year ago is playing in Las Vegas, and that's just the truth. But also the best player from this, and I'm talking about Wilkins, the best player from this defense had to play 800 snaps last year under Vic Fangio, and all these dudes were in insane condition. And then we've heard, little whispers throughout the offseason, man, Vic was an asshole. We didn't really like playing for him. So let's see if now that kind of turns the tide a little bit, because, Brad, they don't have to be elite. I think that if they're like top 12 or 13 defense in the NFL, that's going to be good enough to get them kind of to where they want to go, which is the playoffs, and then anything can happen. I don't expect this unit to be a top 5, top 8 unit. But if that happens, Miami's winning the Super Bowl. I think they're going to score on everybody.
Yeah, so I think early on we're going to see this Dolphins defense and they're going to struggle. They're banged up. It's a new system. I think by the end of the year, once Bradley Chubb potentially comes back, we'll see Jalen Phillips, and he comes back. You got to find a replacement for Van Ginkel, who's now in Minnesota. Is it Chop Robinson, the rookie from Penn State? There's been some buzz, but the problem is it's, he's a speed rusher, right? Like, he's having a hard time holding the edge. There's potentially some issues on this defense. Now, does that matter early on? I mean, we know what the Dolphins do to start the season. They come out firing on offense, like just embarrassing teams. It's when they get later in the year, can they find a running game? Can they have adjustments to what these defensive coordinators do? And are they able to counter? I like Mike Macdonald. I think he's a fantastic coach. I think he's changed the culture down in Miami in terms of creativity and fun and explosiveness. But I think there's some real questions about what his adjustments do on a season-by-season basis, or a week-by-week basis, or later in the year, Tyson. It reminds me of Cliff Kingsbury. Get out to a fantastic start, be hot, and you're rolling, and then all of a sudden, defensive coordinator's like, oh, that's their tendency. That's what they like to do. We're going to throw this wrinkle at it, and they just haven't been able to counter.
He's got the opposite of the McVay Shanahan, where they get hot in the second half of the season, and it's like, oh, shit, I don't want to play the 49ers or the Rams. Where the Dolphins are the first 9 games. You just pencil that in as an L. I mean, we all thought the Broncos had the worst defense in the history of the NFL a year ago. And then all of a sudden it was like, wait, these guys aren't that bad. What's going on over here in Miami? Is Miami going to take a step forward this year? And what does that look like, I think is the real question, because you can't sit here and say winning 11 games and playing in the divisional round is a step forward. I think, in order to truly judge this team is like, wow, they did take that step. It's an AFC Championship game appearance.
Yep, I agree with you there. Let's get into the Jets, because you want to talk about major expectations and huge, like, we need to go deep in the playoffs or else this thing's a disaster. And that's the New York Jets. I mean, it's Super Bowl or bust, basically, in terms of what this team is facing right now. Aaron Rodgers is healthy. He looks good in preseason camp. Okay, let's stop there with the Jets, and we'll kind of dissect things from there. Because this quarterback situation has been so bad in this franchise that if you even get a freaking 15 production-wise, like a middling production from your quarterback, this team and this offense can actually look like it's competent. That's how bad it's been in New York. On the flip side, the defense, we know it's elite. I mean, star player after star player at every single level who are productive. Get after the quarterback, turn him over, cover wide receivers, make life difficult, and then stop the run. Like, it's impressive. And when you factor in the bad situations they are put in routinely because the quarterback's turning it over or they're going 3 and out and they're constantly on the field, there's an opportunity, or there's a real chance that this is the best defense in the NFL. Now, we got to see it. You brought up Robert Saleh earlier. It's going to come down to what Aaron Rodgers looks like. Can he stay healthy? Can he perform well? Can Nathaniel Hackett dial up enough stuff? Or can Aaron Rodgers do enough audibles where this offense finally looks competent?
That's the biggest question in the NFL this season, I think, because if Aaron Rodgers looks like if we get 2018 Aaron Rodgers, this team is walking its way to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. I don't think that's going to happen. It'd be crazy if it did. I really don't know what to expect from Aaron Rodgers, and I think that it's a little funny right now that people are penciling in. Well, he's going to throw for 4,000 yards, and he's going to have 30 touchdowns, and he's not going to turn the ball over. And that's the biggest thing, is if he doesn't turn the ball over and this offense is boring, they probably still win 10 or 11 games. And that's what he can bring, is playing within himself, playing within the system, and understanding situations on the football field better than just about all but 8 guys that have ever done it, essentially. If he doesn't look like that, and this team wins 9 games, and they get embarrassed in the offseason trading for Hassan Reddick, who still hasn't reported to camp, and they move on from John Franklin Myers, and you move on from Bryce Huff, and the front office still has horrible, outside of a couple really, really solid drafts, and I don't want to take those away from Joe Douglas, it has been a disappointing tenure, and it has been a here go the Jets again kind of situation, but there has been your Sauce Gardners and your Breece Halls and your Garrett Wilsons all sprinkled in throughout there, so we're forgetting about it. This team also doesn't have a ton of depth. The defense is loaded. We know that. The offense, you can't afford to lose any of these new offensive linemen. You can't afford for Garrett Wilson to nick his ankle and miss 4 weeks, because then we're talking about replacement-level players on a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. And I think that's an organizational failure. And I think it's one that's going to rear its head probably some point throughout the season. Everybody gets injured. We see it every year. And I just don't think they built an actual football team. They've won every headline, but they haven't won anything on the field, and I don't think that changes.
Well, we'll see. I truly believe if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, this team's going to be good, and if he's productive. I just can't believe they were able to win. I'm looking it up right now. Tyson, this team last year won 7 games with that quarterback situation. It's crazy. And I don't even think that's necessary. I mean, you kind of got to tip your cap to Robert Saleh a little bit, just because, holy smokes, how the hell did they even stay locked in? You're kind of like, all right. I mean, if he sucks, just how these guys stay bought in. But if Rodgers even is a shell of himself, that's better than what they've had. And I agree with you in terms of the offensive line. But you bring in Morgan Moses, who was really good last year for the Ravens. We are familiar with Tyron Smith, being Eagles fans, and from him being the left tackle of the Cowboys, we think he's a little bit long in the tooth. I mean, he's definitely on the back 9 of his career. But when he's on, he's still a good left tackle. If one of those guys get hurt, you drafted Olu Fashanu, who's the best pass-blocking offensive lineman in this draft, who looks ready and able to step in on spot service. This, to me, is the offensive line. This is the best it's looked. This group of weapons with Garrett Wilson, you bring in Mike Williams just to have some stretch the field type of capability. Malachi Corley, Breece Hall in his second year off his ACL injury. This offense is ripe to explode. It all depends on if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, and that's literally this entire season for the Jets. We can go through the defense. We can go through the drafts. We can go through the players. If Aaron Rodgers is off the field, this team will underperform. If Aaron Rodgers is playing good football, this team is going to be really good. That's just where I'm at with the Jets.
And we don't helmet scout in college. We hate when people do that. Brad, I got to be honest. Sometimes I look at these organizations in the NFL and I just go, well, you've never figured it out. And so I don't believe that they're going to.
Let's move into the New England Patriots. Tyson, I got to say, just off the bat, I think this is going to be a disaster. I mean, this could legitimately be the worst team in the National Football League. I mean, if you're a gambling man, I'm telling you right now, take a ticket, worst team in the league. I think there is a real chance they perform worse than the Carolina Panthers, who have momentum. They're going to start Jacoby Brissett. They're going to start Drake May. That's just what it is. They know that. Gerard Mayo, listen, it seems like a good guy leading the crew. Was a defensive leader under Bill Belichick. They're doing stuff completely different than the Belichick regime. We know what happens when you go from the hard ass to the fun and gun, and sometimes it works for a couple weeks, and that thing crumbles, man. You already traded Matthew Judon. What is this team going to look like? I just have no faith in the Patriots getting it right this season.
No, and I think that's okay. That's kind of where I'm at with New England. I think they expect to be bad. I think that Bob Kraft is going to do everything in his power to make it seem like that's not the way that they're trying to present themselves. I hope for Drake May's sake, for the New England Patriots' sake, that Jacoby Brissett does get to play and he gets to play a decent amount. I don't know if Drake May's like super ready to step into this thing. Now, if he had the wide receiver core of the Miami Dolphins in division, then maybe he could. But we're talking about some rookies as far like you're talking about Javon Baker and Jalen Polk are kind of your big name guys. You got Pop Douglas in the slot, who I actually think is a really good player. I think that Demario Douglas has slept on a little bit in league-wide circles. I think Ramondre Stevenson has been kind of overrated in the national consensus as far as like, oh, he's a good running back. But that's I say it all the time, but it's just kind of like, well, you're playing fantasy football and there's nobody else on his team that gets the football besides Ramondre Stevenson. But like the guy averages 3 yards a carry, and it's really hard to tell. Is this him or is this a horrible offensive line? Because that is still a huge problem here in New England. The defense, like, how many blue chippers do they have on the entire team? On the entire team.
Oh God, I mean, basically none on offense. Honestly,
I don't think any on offense, and I don't know about any on defense besides like projections. Like you can say, well, Christian Gonzalez is going to be a blue chipper, but we haven't seen it. We don't know.
Hurt.
Yeah,
his first year. That's never a good sign. I mean, God, you just hate that. You hate for anybody to get hurt, but it's like the concerns coming out of college was a little too wiry and may get hurt, and he gets hurt, right away, and you just kind of look at it like, So you're with me? You think this is the worst team in the league?
I think that there's a really good chance. If I had to pick, let's see, who else do I think is going to be really, really? It's got to be them. Like if I'm just guessing, as we sit here right now on September 3rd, Denver's going to be better than them. Carolina's probably going to be better than them. I think the win total, I think Vegas is reflecting that. I think it's one higher. I think the bottom of the league has changed to the point where everyone else seems to have at least like a glimmer of optimism. And in New England, it's like, well, let's just find out if he can play, because we'll do the rest of this after we find out if Drake May can play. If he can't, we can never let them live down some of these trade offers that have been reported that they were getting for that pick. That is franchise altering. And to turn that down for anybody in this draft not named Caleb Williams, to me, was a head scratcher.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it doesn't matter if Drake May is good. I mean, we throw everything we just said because the future's bright. If he sucks, this is a disaster. I mean, honestly. So let's close out here. What we're going to do is just kind of give our overall thoughts, closing thoughts here on the AFC East. Now, for me, it's a toss-up. I'm bought into the Bills still. I think people are too low. I'd still have them the best team in the league. Or I'm sorry, in this division in the AFC East. Tyson, they're back in the underdog role, man. Before, the past 2 years, everybody's like, oh, the Bills are the best and they're the favorites in the AFC. And now everybody's like, this team sucks. That's when Buffalo thrives. I think we're going to see something surprising here. Let's go, Buffalo. I think they can catch them. I'm bought into the New York Jets, man. If they keep Aaron Rodgers upright and healthy, this is going to be a really, really good football team. So I have them number 2, my power rankings here. Dolphins, I love the offense. I just think they're going to start out slow. If they lose games early, if they're not able to just win shootouts, I think they're going to have a hard time making up ground in the AFC. Then the Patriots, we just kind of went through what we think about them. Legitimately, I think they're going to be the worst team in the league. Yeah,
I mean, it's easy to work backwards in this one and just start at 4 and kind of fill in. This is a really confusing division to me. I do not know really what we're going to get from the Dolphins, Bills, or Jets, so I kind of defer to who I think is the best quarterback in the division. I think that's Josh Allen. And I also think maybe they have the best coach in the division. And I know we've done a lot of crapping on Sean McDermott, some of it rightfully so. Some of it, we were just piling on with everybody else. It was fun. What do you want from us? But I think that the Bills are going to be good. I think that Miami has the chance to kind of like run away with this thing. If you look up in the middle of November and you go, oh, the Dolphins are 3 games clear of everybody, that would make sense to me. And I really do think we're going to get a New York Jet implosion at about week 10 or 11.
Love it. All right, let's get out of here. Like, subscribe, and share the show, guys. You know the drill by now. Smash that like button on the way out if you're watching on YouTube. We'll be back to close out the NFL division previews with the NFC East. So we'll talk to you then, guys. Peace.